Welcome to This Explainer. Today, we're diving into the fascinating logic, structure, and the symbolic architecture behind the Book of Leviticus. Now, if you've ever tried reading through ancient texts, you already know it's so easy to get completely lost in the sheer volume of rules, regulations, and these incredibly specific procedures. But instead of just staring at a dry list of ancient laws, we are going to uncover the brilliant underlying system that actually held an entire civilization together.
So here is the big question we're asking today, and it's one that completely transforms how we view this ancient text. What is the actual logic behind ancient sacrifices and rituals? I mean, it's a concept that feels incredibly foreign to us today, right? It's super easy to just dismiss it as primitive. But the truth? The truth is far more complex and highly organized. There's a profound theological and societal framework at play here, and understanding it literally unlocks the entire worldview of the ancient Israelites.
Here is our quick roadmap for today. First, the Book of Leviticus. Second, the sacrificial system. Third, purifying the sanctuary. Fourth, the holiness code. And finally, a holy nation.
All right, let's jump right into section 1, the Book of Leviticus.
While we all know it as Leviticus, which is a term derived from Greek and Latin referring to the Levite priests, the book is actually known in biblical Hebrew as Yikra. That translates to, and he called. I love that, because it draws us immediately into a divine summons. The text literally opens with God calling out to Moses from the tent of meeting. This wasn't presented as some set of secret rules just for an elite class. Actually, scratch that. It's the exact opposite. It's a public address intended for the entire community. Everyone was meant to hear this. And the historical timeline of how this text came together is just fascinating. Scholars who study the documentary hypothesis point out that this book wasn't written overnight. It developed over a really long period. We see the origins of the holiness texts taking shape around the 7th century BC. Then later, during the post-exilic period, different documentary sources, specifically the priestly source and the holiness source, were deliberately woven together. Ultimately, Leviticus reaches its final, polished form during the Persian period, right between 538 and 332 BC. So we're looking at a text shaped and refined by generations of ancient thought. Moving right along to Section 2, the sacrificial system.
Okay, so the absolute crucial point when stepping into the ancient tabernacle is categorizing these rituals, because if we don't separate them, it honestly just looks like a chaotic amount of animal offerings. But there is a strict underlying logic here. Some sacrifices were entirely voluntary. You brought them completely out of your own free will, maybe for Thanksgiving or just to seek communion with God. Others, however, were mandatory. If a specific rule was broken or a boundary was crossed, these mandatory sacrifices were absolutely required to purge pollution, manage impurity, and restore balance to the community.
Within those two main categories, there are 5 specific types of sacrifices. The first 3, the burnt offering, the cereal offering, and the communion sacrifice, those are the voluntary ones. The last 2, the purification offering and the reparation offering, are the mandatory ones. And you know what is so wonderful about this system? It's built-in accessibility. Offerings range from really expensive bulls from the herd all the way down to simple, unleavened baked flour or a pair of pigeons. The system was meticulously designed to ensure that even the absolute poorest members of society could participate and remain in good standing. Nobody was priced out of the sacred. Now check out this clear division of labor. The priesthood wasn't some esoteric, secretive cult hiding in the shadows while everyone else just watched from afar. The process was highly collaborative. The everyday person actually brought the animal, laid their hands on its head to claim ownership, and even performed the slaughtering themselves out in the courtyard. But the priests, Aaron's descendants, they had exclusive rights to the altar itself. Only they could handle the blood, burn the fat, and minister inside the actual sanctuary. It was very much a shared ritual.
That brings us to section 3, purifying the sanctuary.
I know, to the modern mind, the constant mention of blood sounds a bit gruesome, but to the ancient Israelites, the equation was incredibly simple and profound. Blood equals life. The Israelites didn't sacrifice to feed God, which was actually super common in surrounding ancient cultures, nor did they use blood for magic. Rather, they used blood as a pure symbol of life. Dashing it against the altar was a way of returning life back to God. Think of it like a powerful, symbolic detergent used to purge the sanctuary of the negative pollution caused by human failure. This step-by-step process shows exactly how inadvertent sins were managed.
Let's say someone sinned unintentionally. That action generated a kind of invisible negative pollution that essentially adhered to the sanctuary. If too much pollution built up over time, the divine presence of God would abandon the tabernacle, and that was a catastrophic thought for the nation. So, to fix it, the offerer brings a female goat or sheep. The priest applies the blood to the altar, the sanctuary is purged, and atonement or cleansing is achieved. Boom, harmony is restored.
But what if the sin wasn't just a mistake? What if it involved actively defrauding someone or committing a sacrilege against a holy item? Well, that required a reparation offering. And this wasn't just some quick spiritual fix. It required genuine physical restitution. The offender had to sacrifice a ram and repay exactly what was taken, plus a 1/5 penalty. That's a 20% tax on top. It provided a tangible healing balm for a tormented conscience, proving that real repentance requires making things right in the physical world too.
Let's move into Section 4, the Holiness Code.
This term, the Holiness Code, was actually first coined by a German theologian named August Klostermann way back in 1877. If we look really closely at the text, we can see that these specific chapters have a totally different rhythm and vocabulary from the rest of the book. The code is defined by its incredibly repetitive use of the Hebrew word kadash. While we usually just translate this as holy, its root meaning is to be set apart, special, whole, or clean and pure.
Over and over again, the text hammers home this one central guiding command: "You shall be holy, for I, the Lord your God, am holy." Professor Christine Hayes points out in the source material that this bold command represents a massive theological paradigm shift. God isn't just saying, hey, follow these rules. God is literally saying, imitate my nature. And here's exactly why that shift is so monumental. If we look at the first 16 chapters of Leviticus, only the priests, the descendants of Aaron, are explicitly designated as a holy class. They're the VIPs, the only ones set apart for the sanctuary. But the Holiness Code changes everything. It completely democratizes holiness. It demands that the entirety of Israel itself, the whole society, be set apart and holy. Holiness is no longer just for the guys working inside the tabernacle. It is a profound expectation for the average citizen walking right down the street.
Which leads us perfectly into Section 5, a holy nation.
The code gets incredibly specific regarding exactly how to maintain this societal holiness. It rigorously regulates sexual activities, laid out in a chiastic or mirrored structure in chapters 18 and 20. It includes severe warnings that violating these boundaries will cause the very land to vomit you out. Wow. Many modern scholars note these rules served vital public health functions, like avoiding sexually transmittable diseases. But right alongside these strict physical rules, we find deep social justice mandates. It dictates caring for the poor and marginalized by leaving the edges of your fields unharvested, and it introduces the famous sweeping ethical command we still know today, to love thy neighbor as thyself.
And this brilliantly illustrates the ultimate takeaway from Leviticus. For the ancient Israelites, managing sanctuary pollution through animal sacrifice and treating your neighbor fairly in a business deal were two sides of the exact same coin. The boundaries of the sacred didn't just stop at the tabernacle gates. They extended right into the bedroom, the marketplace, and the harvest fields. Strict ritual purity and daily ethical behavior were entirely inseparable. They were one coextensive expression of God's will.
To wrap up this explainer, I want to leave you with this thought. We so often separate our modern legal codes from our ethical or spiritual lives, but in Leviticus, everything is woven together into one unified architecture of the sacred. So, how might understanding this ancient, symbolic worldview change the way we view the foundations of our own modern ethical codes? What do we consider sacred in our society today, and how do our daily actions reflect that? Thank you so much for exploring this fascinating text with me. Keep learning and keep asking questions.